Hey, what's going on, guys? Carter here with Edge Mindset. We're gonna do something different today. We're gonna talk about knives. We're gonna talk not just about knives. Today, only on the channel, we're gonna talk about OTF automatic knives. For anybody that's new here, that was dripping with sarcasm. In fact, all we do on this channel is talk about knives. And I love me some OTFs, especially Microtech. So I want to talk about my two most favoritist, most bestest Microtech designs ever. I think ever. A couple things I want to talk about. One is how my opinion has changed on both of these. I've already talked about it on the Troodon here, the Combat Troodon, but I'll say it again. But more recently, the same exact thing happened to the Scarab right here. And the other thing I wanted to point out, so we're going to talk about that. I'm going to gush on these knives a little bit. And just in general, I'm going to gush on some knives. But then I also want to compare these two because I found it kind of interesting, these two knives and the Scarab II Gen 3 in general. I want to talk about that too. So a couple different things. First, let's get that out of the way. Let's get the weird naming going on. And the only reason I'm bringing this one up first, it's the least important. In fact, I wasn't even going to talk about this. I just thought of it right now. Just get it out of the way. So, and I mentioned this when these first started coming out, these Gen 3 Microtechs. In fact, I believe the Scarab was the first one that was kind of announced in the new generation of Microtechs. One of the first things I commented on was how all over the place the naming was. And that continues to this day. It's kind of confusing. So this is a Scarab II. Now, the main difference between a Scarab 1 and a Scarab 2 is size. The Scarab 2 is like a Scarab XL. It's really, really big, and that includes the previous generation and this one. However, when they came out with the new generation upgrades, which is primarily the dual springs with the longer throw handle, the crud cutter, some other things, they labeled that as Gen 3. So the official name for this knife is Scarab 2 Gen 3. Not Scarab Gen 3, Scarab 2 Gen 3, even though there's no Scarab 2 Gen 2, there's only a Scarab 2 Gen 1, I guess, so they just jumped all the way to Gen 3 to match up with the Gen 3 changes. I don't know, it's kind of confusing. This is considered just the Combat Troodon Gen 3 with Gen 3. So does that mean, so if you follow the same naming, stay with me here, if you follow the same naming tier as this one, this should be the Microtech Combat Troodon Gen 3, Gen 3. If you were to make them equal. Gen 3, Gen 3, Gen 2, Gen 3. Anyways, okay, let's get that out of the way. Let's just talk about how much I love both of these knives and how I didn't necessarily love them when they came out. So when this first came out, I was a little apprehensive. I liked it. I was one of the first ones to get one. I saw the announcement. I bought this exact knife, which I have carried a lot. I bought this exact knife from microtechknives.com, and I paid the extra because I think they charge like shipping and stuff, and retailers typically don't, so I paid more because I wanted the low serial number, which once I got it, I realized none of these are serial numbered, and so it didn't matter, and there was no point in doing that. I did get a low date though, so December of 2023, which means truthfully this was made in November because they always like predate their knives, I think. So I got this right from Microtech, and when I got it, I liked it. I liked the action. I thought the design was cool. I really liked the upgrade of the titanium pocket clip with the ceramic ball in there. I thought it was good, but I wasn't in love with it. I kind of felt like some of the other people, and I almost felt like it was a cheapified version from the original, even though there's no real reason to think that because everything on this is as premium, in fact, more premium materials than the previous generation of Combat Troodon, especially with the bent pocket clip. The original one had just a bent steel pocket clip kind of like this. But for some reason, I kind of agreed with other people that there was just something kind of cheapish about it or something that just didn't seem great about it. But now it couldn't be further from the truth. I absolutely love this pattern, this knife, this new generation of Combat Troodon. It is my absolute favorite to the point where when I pull out the previous generation Combat Troodon now, I don't like it as much. I really don't. I love this new action. I love the design of the handles. I think it's the best looking knife that Microtech has done in a long time. And the fact that they increased the blade length, improved the blade to handle ratio is just icing on the cake. I really, really like this. And let me reiterate, I'm getting no kickbacks from Microtech, right? So everything I've purchased, everything I've shown from Microtech has either been lent to me or I've purchased with my own money. I've had some dealers kind of hook me up with some deals, but Microtech hasn't, they've been awesome. I've talked to them. I've met them at shows. I talked to them online. David, particularly, awesome dude. Love chatting with him. But yeah, so I don't, and the reason I say that is just I'm not being, the wheels aren't being greased. I'm not saying that because I've got some sort of relationship. I just really love Microtech OTFs. Always have. Some of it's nostalgia. I was around back in the 2013s, 14s, right? Microtech was doing some really cool stuff, and I was in it. I had a lot of Microtechs then, and they're one of the few companies I think that have not only stayed relevant, some of these legacy companies, but I think they've gotten better. I think Microtech has gotten better. Now, some would argue quality used to be way better in the Vero Beach days. I don't know. I can't really confirm or deny. I've had a few Vero Beach knives, and they didn't particularly scream as being particularly better. I just said particularly twice, no, 3 times. I don't, it didn't strike me as that. Now, maybe it's if I took 100 of them, there would be more instances of perfection back then than now. I don't know, but it didn't hit me over the head with it being amazing compared to the new ones. But the designs are just killer. And, talk about finding that balance between keeping up hype by doing special editions and new models and things. And, this is really turning into a Microtech lover boy video. That wasn't my intention. I think they're awesome. Anyways, back to the point. So the same thing happened to this Scarab II Gen 3. I handled one early on. I didn't buy it. PBK sent me one to check out, so I did. I liked it, but I didn't love it. The only thing that really bugged me about it was the blade was skinnier, like this way, than the previous generation, the normal Scarab II. And I didn't like that. It gave me this sense of like a really chunky monkey handle with kind of a skinny blade. And it kind of bugged me. But that has gone away. Now, would I prefer this blade to be as wide as the original? A little bit wider than this? Yes. By no means have I all of a sudden loved the thinner blade. It just doesn't bother me like it did. And everything else with this knife makes up for it in spades. The action, this wider button, you can see how it has a wider button. The Scarabs have always been, or at least the Scarab IIs, that's when they went super wide with the button. The original Scarabs were smaller and thinner in profile. The Scarab IIs are the ones that went super chunky with the button. You can see the blade stock is a lot thicker too. They've always been easier to deploy just because you have more kind of purchase on them. But now that they have the dual spring, dual fuel system that they call it, which is much easier to actuate, this thing is just so smooth and it's so much fun to deploy. Throw a couple drops of oil in there and this thing is just a screamer in terms of action. And this button design is perfection. Look how steep it is. Look how it's got, if you can see how it's like, it's concave in there, like your thumb just nestles in there and you got so much grip with these ledges. Anyways, really love the action. They kept the inlays, which has always been the quintessential part of the Scarab is the inlays. Since the beginning, they kept that. I think it's kind of cool how it's a little different on the back. It just makes it a little asymmetrical. Really, really like this knife, and the fact that they brought back the DES blade shape is money. This is by far my favorite blade shape. I wish they would offer it. Well, I kind of wish they would offer it in all the models, but then I also kind of like it being special like this. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is the Scarab II has always been kind of touted by Microtech as the largest of all of their double action OTFs. Not OTFs, the Halo is bigger, but the double actions, it's always been like the largest. Now, I believe the Makora 2 back in the day was longer, but the largest that's in current production is kind of what they say. But I was looking at it compared to the Combat Troodon, and it's not really longer at all. In fact, the blades are almost exactly the same length. The Combat Troodon has maybe a few millimeters of length on it. And then if you follow this down to the butt here, it's like, yeah, technically the Scarab II is longer with that glass breaker, but the actual frame itself is a little bit shorter. And so, yes, technically this one is a little bit longer by whatever that distance is. Let's do this here. And when you actually match up the tips of the blade, it makes it even more slight. Like, what is that? Like 2/8 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch? Not much, not much. It's definitely wider. You can see that. It's for sure wider. It's got thicker blade stock. But in terms of length, it's really not, which is interesting because I kind of always thought that the Scarab was considerably longer, even after having both of these. But now I realize it's kind of not. And I also wanted to do a weight comparison. I want to see what the weights are. Because this one has, the titanium and the ball on there. They're probably closer than I think. So 5 ounces on the Combat Troodon, and 5.8. So yeah, okay, almost a full ounce heavier. So it is quite a bit heavier with that thicker blade stock. But man, what a cool knife. I picked this one up at a really good deal pre-owned. And it was one of the things where I wasn't even that excited about it. I just wanted to get that DES blade. But ever since I got it, I have fallen in love with this thing. And I've been more excited about this knife right here than I've been with really anything in a while, I want to say. This one it just really captured my heart. You know what I'm saying? The action. So that's the thing. If you haven't handled one of these new generation Microtechs, you got to try the action. If you're an OTF person, if you like that sound, if you like that feeling, if you like that vibe that they give, you got to give it a shot, because even if you don't dig the looks or the prices or anything like that, you got to give the action a try. It's what really clenches it for me. When I go back to the previous generation action, I tried to be one of those guys that are like, oh, I like my action a little stiffer. I like to really mean to fire it. I can't go back. Like, I don't. I've got 3 previous generation Scarabs, and this one is just so much more enjoyable to fire. And I don't just mean easier. It's just funner. It's more fun. It just has a better feel to it. It's just, I like it. And of course, it is easier to actuate. You can do it. I can do it with my index finger. You can't do that with the previous generations. And there's lots of guys out there that have weak hands, nerve damage, other issues, and they've stayed away from OTFs because they just can't reliably use them. And so being able to do something like this is really, really cool. And in my opinion, I know some of you are going to say, well, now they're not as safe because they're too easy to deploy. Yes and no. Technically, yeah, if a child were to get a hold of this, and maybe that child would not have been able to deploy the previous version, and maybe they can deploy this version. So yes, in that sense, it is potentially more dangerous. In terms of accidental deployment, no, it's not, because they've changed the stiffness of the action for just longer action. So you on this version, on the previous version, you had to be intentional with firing it because it was so stiff and kind of difficult to do. With this one, you have to be intentional because it's a lot of travel. Like, you're not going to accidentally move this all the way down. I mean, look how far it goes before it finally retracts. That's a lot of movement. You know you're actuating this thing. So I don't think it's any less safe. And of course, neither one of these are going to fire in the open or closed position. The blades are at rest. If anyone wants more information on that, I would love to explain how these things work again and why this is safe to throw in your pocket, in your bag. It's not going to fire. There's nothing to fire. It's not under tension. There's no spring tension going on right now. So completely safe. One of the few knives where you can really just bang this thing around and you don't have to worry about it. Something like this, blade could pop open accidentally if it's in a bag or something. You're driving, blade could pop open, it could cut through, you could cut yourself. With this, it's not going to happen. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. So I always say comment down below, but you know what I mean. Appreciate you guys. Love doing these videos. I'll talk to you later.